Hello everyone and welcome to my second edition in the Teacup Philosophy podcast. Okay, so today I'm going to look at 10 great philosophical debates. So you may want to grab a brew and get yourself comfortable because these are debates that are really going to get you thinking. Now, before we look at what these philosophical debates may be, I want to just outline some philosophical theories and just do a little bit of an intro. And this will help us to think about how we can play our critical thinking evidence and how we can sort of construct arguments as we're going further forward. So once I've put these great philosophical debates out there for consideration, you then can think about ones that you may like to cover going further forward, and whether that's getting involved in commentary on this podcast or doing it for yourself, that's perfectly fine either way. We can just sort of like look at ways in how we can critically analyze all these different debates. So let's start with a little bit of an introduction into philosophy. Okay, so if you've got your brew in hand and you're in thinking mode, then that's a good place to start. So, philosophy. Okay, life is not straightforward. We can't always find the answers to the questions that keep us deep in thought without any clear conclusion. So I think we can all agree with that. And this is why having the ability to create good arguments and perspectives enables us to balance both quantifiable and qualitative evidence to draw our conclusions. So this means subjective and objective stuff, science stuff, and stuff that's based on more empirical sort of stuff that you can't actually prove with science, but has been proven over time with evidence and patterns, a bit like psychology. So those sort of disciplines. So this is why having these abilities to look at these arguments will help us to draw better conclusions. So I put together a list of topical debates. Now I did do this list on Medium a while ago, just as a blog, and one of those was the most popular, and I'll tell you which one that is as I go further along. But this is my list of topical debates that I think you might find interesting. But remember, the idea of this podcast is to look at more sort of humanitarian type stuff, ethics, and to look at also the metaphysical side. So the stuff around maybe paranormal stuff, existence, and what happens when we die, and all that sort of spiritual element of things. So that touches across different themes of philosophy, but we'll go into that in a second. So, the judicial system and scientists can create frameworks for what's right and wrong to aid your conclusion, but as a philosopher, you need to reach that conclusion and evidence it. Philosophical debates can be created from interest, research, or the fundamental processes for creating disciplines. Major areas of philosophy include knowledge and truth, which is epistemology. Now, I have to declare that my words and pronunciation are not great at the best of times, and given that I'm trying to recite words out of philosophical text is a bit of a challenge. So if I get something wrong, please tell me. So these are the 5. Knowledge and truth, epistemology, which is ironic because it does sound like you are slightly drunk when you say it. Number 2, reality and being, which is metaphysics. Number 3, governance and state, political philosophy. See? Value and ethics, aesthetics, axiology. Number 5, reason, logic. So you've got the 5 different areas of philosophy. So epistemology, metaphysics, political philosophy, aesthetics, axiology, and logic. So to create a discussion, you will need to gather evidence, analyse the evidence, critique it with some examples, summarise, and then conclude. So if you're compiling a paper on the matter, so something a little bit more academic or on research based, you will need to headline it with your hypothesis, which is your statement, your sort of conclusion. So I don't know, the sky is blue. That's your conclusion. So you have to explain in your report, your writing, how you reach that hypothesis, that conclusion. Philosophical debates can be fun, informative and satisfying, but philosophy is not about opinion. It is about creating a valid argument for debate. So, after all that little bit of introduction and me getting my teeth in the wrong way around different words, here are 10 philosophical topics to consider. And what I've done is I've also added some philosophers you might want to look up to see some debates around those subject areas. Okay, so we have 10 philosophical debates. Okay, the first one is there life after death? And that would come under metaphysics ordinarily. So there you would have Plato, Descartes versus Epicurus, so two different arguments there, and Dawkins. So you could look at any of those philosophers and get some further theory and insight into different theories around if there's life after death. Okay. Number 2, this is a good question. Can it ever be justified to kill someone? Now, on this one, you'd be looking at ethics, maybe political philosophy, and you could look at Mill, Augustine versus Kant, so two different distinctions there, and look at pacifists. 3, is there a God? And this will come under theology, so like religious philosophy and metaphysics. So in here we have Aquinas. You might want to check that I've said that right. It's Aquinas. I've not really gone much into this one. Anselm versus Hume. And I can never say your name. I'm going to pause this and I'm going to come back. So his name is Nietzsche. And I'm going to spell it. It's Nietzsche. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these names in the chat as a comment, and then you can have a look. And I can remember having the same issue with this name when I was studying it because I could never ever get it right. Number 4, does truth exist? I found this one quite interesting. So this comes under epistemology, and that would you could look at philosophers like Plato, Aristotle versus Foucault, Foucault. So you've got two different arguments, and postmodernists. Number 5, do we have a soul? Metaphysics. So here you could look at Descartes versus Ryle and Dennett. Number 6, how do we determine intelligence? So this would come under epistemology, and you could look at Turing, IQ theory versus Gardner, and you can look at Goldman. Number 7, do aliens exist? Here you can look at scientific epistemology, and you could also look at Drake equation versus Fermi paradox as some examples of how you can relate to those different theories. Number 8, if something is wrong, is something wrong if no one knows about it? So this one's an interesting one, and this comes under ethics. Here you can look into different philosophers such as Kant, and yes, I did say that right, divine command theory versus cultural relativism. Number 9, can you predict the future? Another interesting one. So this would come under metaphysics and logic. Spinoza, determinism versus free will, and looking at the chaos theory may help you to understand some of the theories and perspectives around this. And number 10, should animals have the same right to live as humans? And this is a big one for me. And this will come under ethics, and you can look at philosophers Peter Singer and versus human exceptionalists. So there's examples here of what you can look at and what theories you can look at to help you shape some of your arguments and just gain some of your... Okay, so I'm going to finish with my 3 recommended books for you to read if you want to understand a little bit more with different theories and perspectives of philosophers and more traditional philosophers. So this one's called Western Philosophy, an Anthology. So this was recommended in my book list at university, and this is what I used to help me in a lot of assignments. So this is Western Philosophy, an Anthology by John Cottingham. It's the 2nd edition, and it's got loads and loads of information. The book is massive. So, if you wanted to read it back to back, then it would take some time. And as always, philosophy is very, very intense. But it may be right, if you are interested in getting really stuck into it, it might be a good one for you for the more detailed stuff. But if you want something a bit more lighter, I suppose, then you could look at maybe something like The Story of Philosophy by, A History of Western Thought by James Garvey and Jeremy Stangroom. And this one was just something I picked up in a charity shop. It's part of a bundle. It probably cost me about 20p when you work out how much everything cost. And it just gives you a good insight of the history of different theoretical perspectives and, some idea of how it sort of works. So I found that quite interesting. And the final one that I want to sort of recommend is one by Nigel Warburton, and he does a lot of academic stuff. He was in a lot of my textbooks and stuff like that as well, voice recordings, and he did a lot of stuff around the history and the really traditional philosophical thought. And I listened to one of his audiobooks called A Little History of Philosophy. And that to me was a bit like my Bible because it gave me an insight to loads of different philosophers and their thoughts and their sort of theories. And this set a bit of a precedent for me because it helped me to sort of think back to different people and different perspectives. And I was able to link it on a level where I can build on. So I'd recommend that one as a beginner because I do think that helps. Anyway, that's my recommendations for books. Obviously, you don't need to read books to listen to this podcast. This is not going to be that heavy unless you want it to be. But I really want to make this a little bit lighter so we can get stuck into some juicy debates. But any theories that you have may help to build some arguments, which is why I do want to cover some of the philosophical theories around this. And that's it. That's me done for today with this podcast. And I will be back on the next one with a little bit more of an introductory podcast. And after that, we'll be getting some really juicy debates and arguments. In the meantime, if you've got ideas of what you'd like to discuss, given the list that I already presented, and, I really want to stick to the humanities sort of life mystery side of things. So some things that probably cover more ethics and metaphysics, if you like, those sort of areas. It may spread into other areas, but they're the 2 that I think probably we may be looking at a lot more on this channel. If you have any ideas, then you can email me. My email should be accessible on the podcast, or you can leave a comment. Remember, if you're leaving comments, they've got to be constructive and they've got to be allowable for people to be able to communicate in a very comfortable way and constructive way. So thank you for listening, and please bring the tea, so to speak, and let's get some debates sort of ordered so we can look at this later on. And I'll speak to you very soon. hopefully within the next week with my next podcast, and then we're going to get stuck in. So bye for now and have a wonderful day.